The city streets were unusually quiet that evening, a rare calm settling over the urban chaos. Somewhere in the dimly lit alleyways, danger moved silently, leaving traces of fear in its wake. On this night, a female police officer was on routine patrol. Unaware that her life was about to take a sharp and deadly turn, she had been following a tip about suspicious activity in a less frequented part of the city. Her radio crackled intermittently with updates from the station, but tonight, her instincts told her something wasn't right. Her heart raced, but her training kept her focused. She stepped carefully, eyes scanning every shadow. But one wrong move, one unexpected encounter, would change everything. Suddenly, a violent struggle erupted just around the corner. Outnumbered and unarmed, she was caught in the crossfire of forces much larger than herself. She fought with everything she had, calling for backup, but the city's dark corners had eyes no one could see. Soon, she found herself injured, barely able to stand, her body failing her as she collapsed in the deserted street. Hours passed. The sounds of the city continued above, indifferent to the scene below. She was alone, struggling for breath, every second more painful than the last. Just when hope seemed to fade completely, headlights appeared from a nearby street. A sleek car slowed, and a figure stepped out. It was a man known in the city for his reputation, a Mafia boss, whose name carried fear and respect in equal measure. He was not the type to get involved in street dramas, but something about that night led him to this deserted street. He noticed the movement on the ground, a body barely conscious, trembling, soaked in blood. The first instinct anyone might have is to turn away, to ignore what they saw. But he didn't. He approached cautiously, assessing the situation with a sharp, calculating gaze. The female officer looked up at him with wide, fearful eyes, unsure if she would live to see another moment. Yet there was a plea in her gaze, silent. Desperate human, he lifted her carefully, ignoring the danger she might have represented to him professionally. Because in that moment, it wasn't about fear or loyalty. It was about survival. Driving through the empty streets, he navigated with precision, taking her to a nearby safe house where he knew someone could provide immediate medical help. Every minute counted. Meanwhile, back at the police station, the officers were frantic. Reports came in about a missing officer, and panic spread. Rumors of her last known location filled the room, and the search began in earnest. Every second that passed increased the tension. No one expected the twist that would soon unfold. At the safe house, the Mafia boss watched over her. Her breathing was shallow, her life hanging by a fragile thread. He called in favors quietly, summoning a medic who owed him a long-standing debt. The arrival of medical help brought hope but also fear. If the police found out he was involved, the consequences could be severe. Yet, in that quiet room, time seemed suspended. The injured officer, barely conscious, managed to whisper her first words, a mix of gratitude and shock at who had found her. It was a moment that blurred the lines of morality and loyalty, showing that even in a world divided by law and crime, humanity could surface in the most unexpected ways. The Mafia boss kept a vigilant eye on her through the night, aware that the police might come knocking at any moment. The city outside carried on, oblivious to the life-or-death drama unfolding in the shadows. Little did anyone know, the next few hours would set off a chain of events that would shock both the criminal world and the police force alike. As dawn approached, the first light revealed her condition was slowly improving. She was weak, pale, and exhausted, but alive. For those who knew her, it was a miracle. And for the Mafia boss, it was a moment that would forever challenge his view of the world, forcing him to make choices that were neither expected nor easy. Part 1 ends here, leaving viewers on edge. How will the police react? Will the Mafia boss face consequences? And what will the female officer do after being saved by someone she was trained to fear? The morning light spilled over the city, But inside the police station, the tension was thick enough to choke on. Officers were frantic, phones ringing constantly, and radios crackling with incomplete information. The missing female officer had been reported for hours, and her last known location led everyone down a trail of fear and uncertainty. When a call came in, a tip about her being found alive, disbelief swept through the department. No one could have imagined who had saved her. The idea that a mafia boss, a man they had hunted for years, was involved seemed impossible. Yet the truth would soon emerge, shocking every officer who had been part of the search. Meanwhile, in the safe house, the female officer lay on a cot, still weak but gradually regaining consciousness. Her body was battered, but her spirit remained resilient. She looked around cautiously, noticing the man who had rescued her. His presence was imposing, yet there was a strange gentleness in his actions. He didn't ask questions, didn't lecture. He simply ensured she had water, bandages, and a moment to breathe. The tension between law and morality was palpable. For her, this man was supposed to be an enemy, someone on the other side of every rule she had sworn to uphold. And yet, he had saved her life. The conflict in her mind mirrored the growing unease in the police force. If they discovered the truth too soon, it could create chaos, both legally and morally. By mid-morning, the station was flooded with officers searching for answers. Witnesses reported seeing a familiar car near the alley where she had been found. Rumors spread quickly, the mafia boss's name whispered in disbelief. The detectives who had been part of the investigation were torn between outrage and admiration. The situation was unprecedented. A criminal had acted out of compassion, saving a law enforcement officer from certain death. Back at the safe house, the mafia boss made a difficult decision. He knew the police could arrive at any moment, and if they found him with her, questions would be asked, questions he might not be able to answer without putting both of them at risk. He considered leaving, but something in him resisted abandoning her. It wasn't just about mercy. It was about a human connection that transcended fear and reputation. As the officer's strength returned, she tried to sit up. Pain shot through her body, but determination kept her going. She finally spoke, her voice shaky but clear. "Why? Why did you help me?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he studied her, his eyes reflecting a complicated mix of pride, caution, and something softer, empathy. "Because someone had to," he finally said. "No one deserves to die like that in the streets, not even someone like you." Those words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. The officer struggled to reconcile them with her own beliefs. Could someone she had always considered an enemy act with such humanity? And what would happen when the police arrived to take control of the situation? Outside, the city had started its usual rhythm, unaware of the tension inside the safe house. But inside, the countdown had begun. The police were closing in, following every lead, every tip that pointed to the mafia boss's involvement. Each passing minute increased the risk, not just for the mafia boss, but for the officer he had saved. Finally, a decision had to be made. The officer, despite her weakened state, insisted she leave with him before the police arrived. "I owe you my life," she said, "and I won't let you take the fall for helping me." It was a moment of trust, fragile but real. Together, they prepared to move, navigating a world where every shadow could conceal danger. The mafia boss knew this was more than just survival. It was about protecting an innocent life in a world that rarely showed mercy. At the same time, the police station was in chaos. Detectives debated how to approach the situation without causing a public scandal. News of a missing officer had already reached city officials. The idea that a mafia boss had intervened, saving her life, seemed unbelievable, yet eyewitness accounts and the evidence from the alley left them with no choice but to accept it. The tension between the two worlds, law and crime, was about to reach its peak. Neither side could predict how the encounter would unfold. And every decision carried weighty consequences. As the afternoon sun began to dip, the female officer and her rescuer moved through the city's backstreets, careful to avoid detection. Every step was filled with uncertainty, fear, and an unusual bond forming in the midst of danger. Two people from opposite worlds, connected by an act of humanity, moving through a city that would never understand the choices being made. Part 2 closes with the suspense of the impending confrontation. Will the police discover their location? Will the mafia boss face arrest despite his good deed? And how will the officer navigate the shock of her savior being someone she had been trained to fight against? The city had shifted into night, its streets glowing with streetlights and the distant hum of traffic. Inside the safe house, the female officer had regained some strength, but the tension in the room was palpable. Every creak of the floorboards, every shadow, reminded them both that the world outside was still watching, judging, waiting, ready to punish the unexpected alliance they had formed. Back at the police station, the news of her survival had spread like wildfire. Officers debated what to do next. The idea that a mafia boss, a man responsible for countless crimes, had saved one of their own was almost too shocking to process. Some questioned his motives, expecting deceit, manipulation, or a trap. Others couldn't deny the truth. She was alive, and that was undeniable. Meanwhile, the officer struggled with her own conflicting emotions. She had been trained to see the mafia boss as an enemy, a symbol of chaos and lawlessness. And yet, here he was, risking everything for her. Her mind kept returning to his words, simple yet profound. No one deserves to die like that in the streets. It was a reminder that morality wasn't always black and white, that courage and compassion could emerge from the most unlikely places. As the hours passed, they knew a confrontation with the authorities was inevitable. Leaving was no longer an option. They had to face the consequences. With careful planning, they returned to the alley where the incident had occurred, leaving no trace of their movements behind. The officer called in a trusted colleague from the force, someone she believed could understand the unusual circumstances. When the detective arrived, the tension in the air was nearly suffocating. Eyes darted between the officer and her rescuer. Questions were asked, answers carefully measured. The mafia boss remained calm, his expression unreadable, but there was a quiet authority in the way he spoke. He explained the events with precision, omitting nothing, showing evidence of her injuries, and the exact sequence that led him to intervene. The detective, initially skeptical, slowly realized the truth. The mafia boss had indeed acted out of sheer humanity. While the law demanded accountability, the officer's life had been saved, a reality impossible to ignore. Word of the incident quickly reached higher authorities, and what initially seemed like a potential scandal transformed into a story of extraordinary courage. For the officer, the experience became a turning point. She learned that heroism could come from unexpected places, and that judging someone solely by their past was limiting. The mafia boss, on the other hand, faced a rare moment of reflection. His actions had consequences, yes, but for the first time, he saw that power could be wielded not just to instill fear, but to protect life. Over the following days, the police carefully documented the story, emphasizing the act of humanity over the person's criminal record. Media outlets picked up the story cautiously, framing it as a real-life tale of unexpected compassion. Public reaction was mixed. Some condemned the mafia boss, others celebrated the bravery and mercy he had shown. For those directly involved, however, the focus remained on the human connection that had transcended fear and loyalty. The officer continued her recovery, grateful for every moment she had been given. She never forgot the man who had saved her life, nor the difficult choices he had made. Though they belonged to different worlds, a mutual respect had formed, one based on trust, understanding, and a shared experience that could never be erased. In the weeks that followed, Small gestures bridged the gap between their worlds. Confidential meetings ensured her testimony remained truthful while protecting the Mafia boss from unnecessary persecution. Both sides learned something vital, that sometimes humanity exists in the most unlikely forms. And that courage is not defined by titles, uniforms, or reputations, but by the choices one makes in critical moments. The story concluded not with a dramatic arrest or revenge, but with a quiet acknowledgement of life's complexity. The officer returned to her duties with renewed perspective, forever changed by the experience. The Mafia boss continued his life, now carrying the memory of the night he chose mercy over fear, a decision that would haunt and inspire him in equal measure. Ultimately, the city remained the same on the surface, bustling, chaotic, indifferent. Yet beneath that familiar exterior, the story of a dying female cop, saved by the hand of someone she was trained to fear, became a whispered legend among both the law and the streets. It was a reminder that sometimes in the darkest moments, humanity shines the brightest, and for anyone who heard this tale, the lesson was clear: courage, compassion, and unexpected bonds can emerge even in a world divided by rules, power, and fear, and they can change lives forever.